and formal welcome to all of you at this PhD Open Defense of our doctorate candidate, Mr. Subham Kumar Kanu. And I am happy that Professor Ranjita Chakroborty, who is from the North Bengal University, Siliguri. She is the head of the Department of Political Science at North Bengal University, former director of IQAC of NBU, and she is also the associate editor of two prestigious sage journals. One is Journal of Asian Security and International Affairs, and second is Journal of World Affairs, if I am correct.
Yeah, managing editor.
Managing editor of Journal of World Affairs. Apart from that, she has multi-dimensional research profile in terms of gender studies, development studies, studies relating to Indian government and politics, public administration. So she has diverse academic interests and engagements, and she has been to this department for different academic programs earlier also. So please come. I extend warm welcome to Professor Chakraborty. She is one of the two external experts nominated by our Vice Chancellor for conducting the Viva Voce and Open Defense, and also for chairing this particular session as per the rules of the PhD ordinance of the university. I am particularly delighted that colleagues from other departments are here, and it indicates, first of all, their personal connection with Subham, but also their goodwill for the Department of Political Science, because generally, as you know, PhD Open Defense sessions are mostly in-house. Colleagues from other departments don't attend it in good number, but today I am happily surprised that senior colleagues and dear colleagues from other departments are here. So I also thank them for honoring the invitation for attending this PhD Viva. Before I hand over the proceedings to Professor Chakraborty as the chairperson, let me say that Subham is one of the, also teachers in the department and has been working both for the department and the faculty in diverse roles, and he has tried to excel in whatever work that is assigned to him, both by the department or by the faculty. And I am happy that both the external examiners of his PhD thesis have given a very favorable report for the work that he has done. So proceedings will be like this: that first we will request Subham to present the key features, findings of his PhD thesis in maximum of 30 minutes. I can give privilege of 5 minutes more, but definitely at 35 minutes you stop. Then it will be open for the members present here to ask questions or to seek clarifications from him with respect to his PhD thesis. Then finally, Professor Chakraborty as an external examiner will also engage in interaction with Subham. And finally, if she will announce whatever her view is with respect to the outcome of this PhD Open Defense. So I invite Subham first to present in maximum of 30 to 35 minutes.
good afternoon to one and all presenter. It is indeed a matter of honor for me to present my work that I have done in the span of last 4 years in front of you all. So, as the title of my thesis is a critical study of China's foreign policy.
In relation to mic, so that shape yourself later.
All right. Okay. So, a critical study. So, am I audible?
Without mic.
A critical study of China's foreign policy in relation to the Middle East region in the 21st century. So there are two regions that are very important as part of my thesis. One, China, another, the Middle East region. China, because of its rise as a great power in the 21st century in various domains. It includes economic, as we all know that it has emerged in the 21st century as the second largest economy in the world. Militarily, it has gained the capability in land, fighting in land, water, sea, and space domain. Strategically and diplomatically, we do see that it has established its presence in South China Sea region. It has also taken grand initiatives like Belt and Road Initiative, and also it has been actively participating in BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and also considered itself as a part of Global South, and has emerged as an alternative to Western-led financial institutions through initiatives like AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, New Development Bank, and also explored in science and technology and soft power approach. So, second, Middle Eastern region, wherein we see that why Middle East is important is first because of its geography. It is a link between Asia, Africa, and European continents, and also it is the region which has major choke points which are strategically very important, through which majority of the trade passes through. And also from the perspective of civilization, we do see that it is a place where three different religions has originated: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And also it has abundant natural resources, because of which the region becomes very important for us to study. And now we have seen in the past, in the 20th century, and even before that, the great powers, whichever they were, did have their presence in the Middle Eastern region, and in fact it was the battleground for all those great power, and the same applies in case of China. So in the past we did see that United States, United Kingdom before that, and France and other countries did have their presence in the Middle Eastern region, and because it served multiple interests to them. And the same applies in case of China in the 21st century, as it emerged as a great power, so it has increased its presence in the Middle Eastern region. So, so what we see that now the rise of China in the 21st century, in the previous centuries we saw the rise of various other great powers. Now what will be the implications of this rise of China to the Middle Eastern countries and also to other great power become a research problem of my thesis. Now here in this slide shows that how China has increased its influence and presence in the Middle Eastern region, has emerged itself as the largest trading partner, Belt and Road Initiative, and diplomatically also has emerged as an alternative to Western-led institutions, as I mentioned previously. And in terms of arms, in terms of military and strategic engagement, we do see that it has started selling arms, ammunition, artillery, and conducting joint exercises with multiple countries in the Middle Eastern region. So what we can say is that the rise of China in the Middle Eastern region is also very important and apparent to us. Now, coming to the next slide, that is significance of research. Now, why this topic is significant for us to study, as I mentioned before, that it includes two regions, one China and another Middle East. China, because of it is our, first of all, it is our neighbor, and whether we like our neighbor or we dislike, we'll have to accept the China and have to deal with China. We cannot change our neighbor. So, and also we see that it has emerged as a large trading partner for India. So therefore, studying China and its foreign policy, its determinant becomes very important for us. Second, that is Middle East. We do see that 90% of India's energy requirements are met through the imports from the Middle Eastern region. Also, around 9 million population diaspora are from India, and also in terms of strategic choke points and India's position over Kashmir issue, which require the support from the Middle Eastern country because it has significant number of Muslim population from that region. Apart from that, Israel becomes important because of its defense, strategic defense and the technological advancement it has, which India imports from Israel. Talking about the other groupings and organizations, we do see that I2U2 and IMEC, the recent initiative that India has taken in its G20 recent meeting. So in order to achieve all those goals, what is required, India's active presence in the Middle Eastern region, and China has increased its presence. So what would be the implications for this rise in China becomes important and significant for this research. Now, based on which I have made the objectives, 4 objectives as part of my thesis. 1. To understand and analyze China's foreign policy objectives, interests and strategies in the Middle East region and the growth of its regional influence in the first 2 decades of the 21st century. Second, to understand and examine the nature and development of China's political, economic and strategic relationship with the key Middle Eastern countries in the first 2 decades of the 21st century. Third, to analyze the objectives and implications of China's Belt and Road Initiative in the Middle East region and evaluate the likely challenges and outcomes. Fourth, to evaluate the outcome of China's foreign policy engagement in the Middle East region and its interface with the foreign policy of other great powers in the region in the first 2 decades of the 21st century. Based on which I have made around 6 research questions which my thesis is going to answer. 1. What is the historical background of China's foreign policy engagement in the Middle East region from the mid-20th century till the end of the 20th century? Second, what are the major objectives and interests of China in the Middle East region in the 21st century, and what strategies has it followed to achieve this interest and objective in the region? Third, what are the key bilateral relationship, political, security and economic driving China's foreign policy in the Middle East region in the 21st century? Fourth, what are the key components of the Belt and Road Initiative of China in the Middle East region? What are the major challenges and implications of Belt and Road Initiative in the Middle East region? Fifth, how far and in what way is China's foreign policy engagement in the Middle East is impacting the dominant role of other great powers in the region, particularly the United States and Russia? Sixth, how far has China's foreign policy strategies in the Middle East region succeeded in achieving its regional foreign policy objectives, interests, and facilitated its rise as a great power at the global level? The methodology which I have adopted in order to write my thesis is both qualitative and quantitative. When it comes to qualitative, it includes content analysis, case studies, and ethnographic studies. Here, when it comes to content analysis, it includes different books, journals, the government statements, treaties, agreements, reports, government publications, which become the major source of my study. Second, case studies, because we know that the Middle Eastern region is very hotspot region, and there are some cases which require an in-depth studies like Gulf War or Israel-Palestine issues, or the countries where we have United States sanctions like Iran, Yemen, Syria, etc., etc. So therefore, it requires an in-depth study. Ethnographic studies is because we do see that there are many ethnic groups which are scattered in different countries, and therefore if there is an influence in or interference in one particular state, will have definitely it's affecting other regions. So therefore, ethnographic studies are also important. Quantitative method, because I have taken, in order to make it much more objective, that I have taken statistical method which include the economic transactions, which will help us to better understand objectively to what extent the influence is there of China in the region. Now, based on which I have categorized it into 8 different chapters, and the detail of which I will explain in the upcoming slides. Chapter 2 is about literature review. I am not going into detail of it. Chapter 3 is about relations between China and the Middle East, historical background. Now here what I have done is that I looked at the history of China from different eras, different dynasties till the 20th century, and also China's relation with the Middle Eastern region again till the 20th century, not 21st century. So what I found while going through the history, a thing that becomes very important is the century of humiliation. China calls century of humiliation, which starts from 1839 to 1949, is because and which largely determine the foreign policy, the aggressiveness, the anti-Western approach of China toward the West. Is because during this point of time we see that there are a lot of imperial countries that invaded, that exploited, that captured different territories, be it Taiwan or Hong Kong or Xinjiang or Manchuria. These were at different points of time were captured by imperial powers and also economically made it in disastrous position. So because of which China considered that it's the greatest humiliation, and which because of which it become much more anti-Western in its approach. And what we consider that the rise of China, that China doesn't consider as its rise, rather what it claims that it is getting back the glory, the path that it had before in the 16th and 17th century. So it says that it getting back the pride that it once inherited. So that this point becomes very important, and also it says that until unless Taiwan is united, its national unification would remain incomplete. So it comes from this particular history also. Now, what more I have done in this chapter is that while looking at the foreign policy of China, I have categorized it into three different eras. One led by Mao Zedong, second Deng Xiaoping, and post-Cold-War era. This is how I have categorized and tried to understand what achievement these rulers have achieved and what are the challenges that they faced. And so Mao Zedong, what achievement it achieved, I have mentioned over here. The same applies in case of Deng Xiaoping and the post-Cold War era. Now, chapter 4 is about China's rise as a great power in the 21st century, an analysis of core capabilities, strategies, and theoretical perspective. Here it includes, it doesn't talk about Middle Eastern region, rather it is solely on China's rise. I mean, on what basis are we claiming that the rise of China is happening? What are the factual data suggest it was? So here, when it comes to the indicators, in terms of economy, we do see that it has achieved more than any other state which has started its journey during at the same point of time. So based on economic capability, we can say that the rise of China is very apparent. So these are the reasons based on which we can claim that this rise of China is apparent and objective in nature. Military capability, when it comes to military capability, as I mentioned before, that it has gained the capability to fight in land, in water, in sea, in space, in all the domains at the same time. So it has achieved a lot of success in terms of military capability. True. And what are the reasons? These are the reasons I am explaining over here. In terms of soft power capabilities, also we see that during the 20th century it was much more sort of passive, much more non-interventionist in nature. Now it has shifted, and also people from various countries, particularly in Middle Eastern region, hesitated to interact much with China because of its ideology, because of different problems that was associated with China. But then it has transformed this passive nature into much more active in the 21st century, and we do find that there are many cases where it is taking part, also trying to mediate different conflict that exists in the region. So this is how it has become much more attractive to the Middle Eastern countries as well. Now coming to the point of strategies which China took in order to increase its power or rise as a global power. Now, of course, one would be that trade relation has deepened the trade relation with the Middle Eastern countries. When in terms of foreign policy strategies, we do see that, as I mentioned before, that it has taken initiative like Belt and Road Initiative, which has the participation of around 148 countries. Out of around 200 countries, 148 countries are member of it. So if it is a negative sum game, then how would this country take part in it and cooperate with this grand initiative? So certainly there is some positive sides of this Belt and Road Initiative, because of which they are taking part. So this is one. Then also when it comes to diplomacy, as I mentioned before, that taking part in United Peacekeeping operations, and we see providing developmental assistance, peaceful diplomacy, engaging in multilateral dimensions, that it has achieved a lot of many things. When it comes to the principles that guides China's foreign policy, that it include 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, avoiding foreign interference, that means non-interference policies, and as I mentioned that increasing military bases in Djibouti and in other Hongon regions, and also taking part actively in South China Sea, BRICS, and all has made us to believe that this rise of China is apparent in the 21st century. Now this next. Now this so here what I have tried to do in this particular slide is that chapter that so there is a rise of China and already established status quo power, that is United States. Now how would United States react? Whether so there are two theories more particularly dominant, realism and liberalism. Realism, which on the one hand suggests that it will not much more conflictual because that has been the case in the past, and liberal suggests that what has happened in the past cannot simply be applied in practice because there are lot many things new which was not there in existence before, so therefore it simply cannot be applied. So that means there are many things that are very new to us, so therefore it will not be as hostile, as conflictual which as it was in the past. Rather it would be not much cooperative, but it would be competitive, but not as conflictual as it was in the past. So that is what this segment focuses on, and that is what I found in the conclusion at the summing up section of this particular chapter also. So, I mean, what argument did I give from the perspective of, from the liberal perspective is here that, I mean, which show that it would be much more cooperative because that from the current global liberal order, China has gained a lot, many things. The rise of China is in the current order, so why would it bring a change from which it has got so many things, right? So therefore, there is no point of changing. Yes, of course, there would be some kind of clash, but then that doesn't mean that it would bring a change from this established order, bring a new order about which we have no idea, right? So now, moving into next chapter, that's chapter 5, it is about key objectives and strategies of China's foreign policy in the Middle East region in the 21st century. So here, I have tried to understand only 21st century, that means the last 2 decades, and what strategies China has in the Middle Eastern region, which include energy security, of course, security, Xinjiang provinces, Uyghur ethnic group, okay, protecting sort of the strategic choke points, establishing its presence, shifting westward from because of the Quad thing, which has United States presence in the region, and also establishing itself as a great power, and also curbing the rise of China, and providing them with international space. Curbing from international space becomes very important, and this is what it can gain from the Middle Eastern region. So these are the main objectives that the fund research, and in order to achieve those objectives, what it exactly tries to do, the strategies that it has taken are, of course, strategic relationship which other country even does. When it comes to the foreign policy approach, that is the principles of non-coexist, non-interference, or non-interference, and the taking alternatives to the West, like AIIB, NTP, which I mentioned previously, and also is cooperating in multiple institutions, as I mentioned, Shanghai Cooperation, BRICS, China, GCC, Arab Summits, etc., and also has increased its presence in United Nations missions, anti-piracies, and also started selling arms, ammunition, artilleries, conducting joint exercises with the countries of the Middle East, becomes very important. And also in terms of soft power, it started providing the humanitarian aid, or sort of providing scholarship to the students of the Middle East, are some of the steps it has taken to increase its presence in the Middle Eastern region. Now, among all these strategies, one is very important, which I have taken as a separate question even, is Belt and Road Initiative, which was started in 2013 and 14, where we find that, as I mentioned previously, that 148 countries are member, of which 20 countries are from the Middle Eastern region. So it's something that is very important to discuss. Now here, what I find is that that these countries are taking part. A lot of infrastructure projects, are with which China is involved. But then there are some challenges also that China is facing with regard to the implementation of the Belt and Road Initiative. What are the challenges I mentioned over here? That the last slide, this one, last point. That debt, sovereignty risk, institutional instability, cultural social sensitiveness, etc., I mentioned over here as in detail in my thesis. Moving to the next chapter, that is chapter 6, is China's bilateral relation with the dominant states. What the dominant state actually mean to me, I will explain that. Dominant states of the of Middle East in the 21st century. Here I have taken 5 countries. One, Saudi Arabia, China's relation with Saudi Arabia, Iran, Israel, UAE and Egypt. These are the 5 countries which I have taken as the key or the dominant country and tried to conduct a sort of bilateral relation rather than a uniform policy which will be applied universally to all the countries of the Middle Eastern region, because China prefers establishing more of bilateral relationship rather than a multilateral a common approach with regard to other countries of the Middle Eastern region. So I have looked into the economy, the political relations, defense, strategic, soft power approach, how China is engaging in all these areas with regard to these 5 countries. Then it also, this chapter also in the next segment, it includes that what has been China's stand on the key aspects of the Middle Eastern region and what has been China's stand on all those issues, because that actually shows what the foreign policy or the intention of China is with regard to the issues. So it includes Israel-Palestine issues or Saudi-Iran conflict rapprochement. It also includes Gulf War of 1991 or the sanctions regions which is facing sanctions region. Now it includes all this. So what has been China's strategy with regard to that? Now in this particular chapter, as I mentioned, why these countries are important for China in the conclusion part of this chapter, what I found was why Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia and UAE are important for China is because of its energy, because of its economy, but that the same cannot be applied in case of other countries like Iran or Israel or Egypt. It's because that China gets China's economic and energy interests are being served by these 2 countries, but then the same cannot be applied, because if you look at the data of China's trade with Iran, we find that it has deteriorated from 2014 onwards. So therefore, why I have taken as dominant state is because it serves strategic partnership, strategic the goal and not the economic goal. It is because it would act as a partner to counter the Western influences in the Middle Eastern region. So therefore, Iran becomes very important. And then also we do know about the Shia-Sunni divide which there exists. So therefore, and also it has a lot of proxies in the Middle Eastern region, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Palestine, in all those regions that Iran has its presence over there through proxies. So therefore, Iran also becomes important. Coming to the Egypt is also important because Egypt is important because of its strategic location, right? It is the one which connects the Europe with Africa and Asia through Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. Okay, and which is connected through Suez Canal, which is located in this particular, which is located in Egypt. So therefore, Egypt becomes important for us to study. So these are the 5 countries which I have taken defense and advanced technologies which are important for China's rise. And so therefore these are the 5 countries. This is how I have selected this 5 countries and taken as my case study in this chapter. The last chapter is about the implications of China's growing influence in the Middle East for other great power. What do I mean by other great power? I have taken 5 countries as a great power. Number one, of course, would be United States, or an established power. Second is Russia, of course. It did play a very important role during the Cold War, USSR, that USSR, and now Russia. Third is United Kingdom, is because it did have its presence in the 20th century, and India because of as a rising power and matter to us the most because which make the thesis relevant. So this is how I have included this 4 country as the great power, and what would be the implication of this rise of China in this particular region. So I tried to look at. So I tried to sort of now, because if there is a rise of China in this region, so this country which are great power would not sit quiet. They would how would they respond to this rise of China? Because that actually determine how a global world order in the 21st century look like. So therefore, whether it would be peaceful conflict of what kind. This chapter is basically a speculative chapter which tells us that what exactly is going to happen is happening. So so this is how I have taken these 4 countries: United States, Russia, and Kingdom, and India. And so what I try to do further is these 5 countries, Saudi Arabia, Iran, UAE, Israel and Egypt, these are the 5 countries that I have taken as a case study. So I tried to look at China's relation with Saudi Arabia and what would be the impact of this relation with regard to, what would be over United States or Russia or India or United Kingdom. I tried to take their implication, what would be the implication of this right over this country in a very specific way, in an individual way, so that we have a clear picture as to what is going to happen and is happening. So this is how I categorize Saudi Arabia, Iran, UAE, Israel and Egypt in this manner. What further more I try to do is China. So I try to look at this Middle Eastern region and how these 4 countries are, whether would they compete with China or would they cooperate with China. So what are the area where would they compete and what are the area where they would compete. So China's relation with China, US cooperation and competition, China, Russia cooperation competition, China, India cooperation conflict. This is how I try to analyze so as to understand whether would it be peaceful rise, conflictual, or how would it actually look like. That is what I try to do. So therefore, what I found is that when it comes to China, United States, we find that there are more possibilities of conflict because there are many things that overlaps, okay, that clashes with one another. So therefore, in terms of sort of diplomacy, say for instance Israel-Palestine issues or Saudi-Iran rapprochement, we do see that these 2 countries, United States and China, they have different approach. So therefore, diplomatically they would be in conflict to one another. In terms of sort of arms supply, we do find that it was earlier it was United States only which happened to, or even Europe also, ally of United States, happened to be the one to provide arms ammunition to the countries of the Middle East. Now China has emerged as an alternative. So therefore, therefore, somehow it is reducing the leverage which United States did have in the past. In case of Belt and Road Initiative, strategic, choke points and all, and also another very important point is China's promotion of democracy, or emphasizing much upon the human rights issues, or bringing about economic reforms. Now this is what United States tries to promote or impose over other countries. But that is not the case with China, and therefore China is very much attractive to Middle Eastern countries because it doesn't talk about democracy, because there are more of authoritarian, right? Monarchs, right? So so because of which that we see that, and it doesn't talk about the human rights values and all. So therefore, because of which we find that China has emerged as a very important alternative and attractive to the Middle Eastern countries over United States or Western allies. So these are the areas where they would, these 2 countries would compete, and the cooperation in terms of terrorism, counter-terrorism, or the curbing nuclear spread or multilateral engagement are some of the areas where they would cooperate. When it comes to China and Russia, we see that there is more possibility of cooperation then conflict, is because there are many cases where they align with one another, where they have a similar kind of interest, Russia and China in the Middle Eastern region. So therefore, Russia takes this presence of China very positively, though with respect to arms sales and munition, it has again China became a competitor, but then in terms of ideology, in terms of the approach with which China engaged with respect to the Middle Eastern country, Russia takes it very positively. So these are the areas where they would cooperate and the conflictual area I mentioned in this segment. China, United Kingdom, what I said about United States, more or less the same kind of idea applies in case of China, UK in the Middle Eastern region, because in terms of its diplomatic engagement, and again we do see that the ideological, sort of pragmatic approach that China has taken is somewhat different from the Western alliances. In terms of defense, economy and all, that they are going to China, the United Kingdom is going to compete with China in the region. Then China-India engagement. Now here, which matter to us the most, as I mentioned here, that Belt and Road Initiative of China and different ways through which China has increased its presence. What we see that it is going to be very much competitive. India has to. India is required to work a lot on this aspect, that when it comes to trade in terms of the strategy, energy sector, because as I mentioned before that the energy, the much portion of its energy is imported through this particular region. When it comes to diaspora, significant of the diaspora that lives in the particular region. And also this Chabahar port, Gwadar port of Pakistan, Chabahar in case of India. So therefore, India will have to compete with China, who did this, success in establishing its presence, because Iran is tilting more toward China. So if it happened, then India's security would hamper, or many a way India would face challenges, right? So there are more challenges than the competition. If you look at from the perspective of India, so that is not even my point. Again, when it comes to the cooperation, again, what I mentioned about India is going to, what I mentioned about the United States is going to be applied in case of India as well. The counterterrorism or the multilateral engagement is where the India can cooperate with China also. Now coming to the last chapter, that is conclusion, is when it comes to China's rise, the strategy that it has taken, or in the 1970s, tilting more toward United States, which has helped China to join institutions like UNSC or become a member of the World Trade Organization. In all these aspects, China has gained a lot, and the approach that it has taken has been to a larger extent been successful. In terms of its economic influence, the data tells us that it has become the second largest economy, and to many accounts of the Middle Eastern country, it is the largest trading partner. So from that perspective also, we do see that it has emerged as a successful country, and its presence in BRICS, and recently there is an increase in the membership of BRICS, and many other countries from the Middle Eastern region have taken the membership of BRICS, right? So Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and all these are playing very important role in and becoming an alternative to Western-led IMF or World Bank or other like-minded institutions. So despite today's success stories of China in Middle East and for that matter in other region, but we see that to some extent it's facing challenges, particularly with regard to the South China Sea. It goes against the international laws, and it has somehow maligned the perception of China, and therefore it appears to be much more aggressive, much more which is much more anti-Western. Which appear to be much more anti-Western, or it tries to capture the territories of China. This kind of an assumption that has come up, and it becomes very much passive to other neighbor countries and the countries concerned. So this is one challenge that is facing. Other than that, Belt and Road Initiative, we see the Pakistan, Sri Lanka are the countries which are falling under the trap of this Belt and Road Initiative. There are many other countries that are falling in the trap. So therefore, it is affecting the finance and sustainability that this project be successful. It creates a question mark toward that. Then with regard to Xinjiang province and Hong Kong, we find that there are multiple questions with regard to the human rights violations in Hong Kong, Xinjiang province. So therefore, it again questions China's credibility, China's way of opposition governance. And when I talked about the engagement with the United States, that is going to be more not as conflict happened in the past because of the reason that I suggested. Okay, China has gained a lot from the current international order, so why is going to change the one which has given it so much? Because it is going to be sort of competitive, but that doesn't mean that bring a change and establish a new order which is unforeseen to us. So therefore, so this is how I conclude this segment. With regard to China and the Middle East, I mentioned that previously from non-intervention is something that appears to be more attractive. When it comes to democracy or human right or economic freedom, China is silent on this aspect. It's concluded that you can continue with the governance system you have, and China has no problem with it. But then the United States tries to bring a change, and therefore China appears to be much more attractive. them. And from this, that it has tilted somewhat toward more active, engaging more actively, and the instance of which we find in case of Saudi-Iran rapprochement or Israel-Palestine issues, where it tried to mediate the conflict so as to have a stable order in the region, which largely influenced the interest of China. So therefore, that also becomes very important for, and it is in this area also to say that China has been successful. So Belt and Road Initiative, I mentioned that that debt trade or the threat to the sovereignty or security threat or sort of economic instability or political the instability, incontinuity in some countries exists, but then how would it sustain becomes, these are some challenges that the Belt and Road Initiative is also facing. So the last chapter is the conclusion of last chapter, as I mentioned, why I have taken these 5 countries. And so Saudi Arabia and UAE becomes more of economic and from energy perspective important for China. Iran from the perspective of strategic ally becomes important for China with regard to Israel because of its advanced technology, and with regard to the strategic locations, Suez Canal, the problem that Suez Canal exists, Egypt becomes important. And I have also explained here that what measures China is trying to take in order to diversify rather than depending solely on Middle Eastern region for its rise. And we do see that yuan-based trade or sort of also cooperating with other countries like Venezuela or Iran for which are against West. Cooperating with this region in order to diversify its and meet the energy requirement which China has. Implication I mentioned, I have already mentioned this part that what implication will have. United States it will be more cooperative. It will be more cooperative. It will be more competitive than cooperation. But with regard to Russia, it is more of cooperation because they have found an alternative through which it can engage in the Middle Eastern region and establish its presence. So this is how, and also mention about the opportunity it has. Now coming to the point of limitation of my research. That I have taken, as I mentioned, that the 5 countries as the dominant. As 5 dominant countries, if I had taken some other countries which are also important, like Turkey is a bridge between Asia and Europe, would have been much more comprehensive. Iraq, Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Oman, Yemen, and some Central Asian country. If I had taken this country, then it would have been much more comprehensive. Number one. Second, if I had taken the perspective how this rise of China is being taken by Latin American continent or African continent, would have been much more comprehensive from that perspective too. If I had taken sort of the interviews with the politicians or diplomats or the experts on China and Middle Eastern region, would have added value or insight to this particular research. So this is how what the gist of my research is, and these are the findings in brief. Yes, of course, it's not possible to finish the entire thing, but I tried to explain the majority of the thing that I tried to do in my research in the span of last 4 years. Thank you so much.
Close this.
This one? We can simply close from here. Shall I do it?
Thank you, Subham, for very comprehensive presentation of your thesis, chapter-wise, and overall conclusions. Now the house is open for questions, answers, and clarificatory notes. You may move the camera and somebody is asking. Yes.
Thank you, Shubham, first of all, thank you for the presentation and it's very commendable. I wanted a clarification regarding your methodology. You mentioned about ethnographic study, right? So can you just put a gist about how did you incorporate it, because it was not very clear.
Yes. So I mentioned about the qualitative and quantitative both, particularly mentioned about the ethnographic studies, is because when it comes to, say for instance, Arab, now the Arab as an ethnic group, we do find that the presence of this Arab ethnic group in Saudi Arabia, in UAE, in Yemen, in Oman, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Libya, Syria, Palestine, many other countries that has its Arab population. So therefore, if there is an interference, or if we bring a change in demography, or if we interfere in one way or another, in what way, I mean definitely it is going to have its implications over, say for instance, Syria, it will have its influence over Libya, and if there is an interference, say, there has been interference in Syria, in Lebanon, so definitely it is going to impact the population of Saudi Arabia, and then Saudi Arabia has to interfere, or one way or another would influence. So this is so what I'm trying to say is if there's a intervention in one particular state, definitely is going to have its implication over. The way we have, say for instance in India, that if there is a if there is something that is happening in Sri Lanka, will have its effect in the southern region, particularly Tamil particular region. So therefore this is how, and if something is happening, say Bangladesh, will have its impact in West Bengal as well. So therefore this is how these topics happen. So I try to look at what will be the effect of what will be, if there is an interference in this region, what will be effect in other regions too. So I try to connect so as to understand what exactly the problem is and how can we actually resolve it. This is how.
Any questions? Then I will now request Professor Chakraborty.
I have some questions. I think I'm audible.
Can we see it?
Oh, yes. We as teachers we are quite audible. Now, first of all, congratulations in the sense that you presented it very well. What I understand that, see, it is a continuously changing thing. Till now, we had seen USA being very, very influential in the Middle East region. Two things have happened. One, the Middle East, the definition has increased. Like there are now new more countries. We don't just say Middle East Asia. We say Middle East and we on the proper place. So there has to be some kind of changes with regard to that. How do you look at it? And second question to me is that you said that US is a rule-based order. Now under Trump, okay, can we really call it as a rule-based order, looking at the way he is dealing with it? And are we going towards a new kind of a post-Cold War, which was ideology-based war that we had seen? Now it is interest-driven war that we are heading towards in the region. This is first question. You say, in fact, I have written down.
First you can answer this first set of questions.
So one that you mentioned about this ideology and pragmatism. So I mentioned previously that China's approach toward the Middle East, or United States' approach toward the Middle East till the 20th century more was of an ideology based, and United States is even continuing the same principle when it comes to the human rights violation. It did interfere in many countries with regard to human rights violation, with regard to democracy, or bringing economic reform based on which it provides funds. But when it comes to Trump, it is tilting more from the liberal perspective, which says that all states are equal, more toward what serves the interest of United States. So if it goes at a very deeper level, what is going to happen that in many a way would come in conflict with China. So if it happens, then there is more possibility of conflict, and how would, because that has happened since last, say, for instance, 5 to 6 years, that there has been very limited trade war is another instance, has happened with China, and if it happens, then there would be possibility of very less cooperation, because China now it has sort of reduced its ideological orientation. Rather, it has become much more pragmatic in the sense that it is open to interact with all kinds of states, be it monarch or theological or democracy, republican. It doesn't matter to them. So therefore, what China is doing, what serves their interests. So long as it's fulfilled their interests, it's going to cooperate. But and in many cases, what we see that with this Trump is coming now, it is becoming much more of America oriented, America first, the way it claims. Right? If it happens, then and the recently shale gas development, the discovery which we see in United States, because of which it reduced the import of oil or the natural resources from the Middle East to United States. And China's energy security, China imports more than 50% of its oil from the Middle Eastern region. So therefore, definitely it is tilting more toward China. But then if this conflict remains and increases, then that is becoming a challenge to the world order we are leading to, right? So this is one. And you talked about the Middle East and West Asia. So almost all the countries, India too, United States, not China, are taking Middle East as the official term rather than calling it West Asia. Is because when it comes to West Asia, it doesn't include say Sudan or Libya or Egypt. It doesn't include it because it's confined only to the Asian region. But when it comes to these countries, that is Africa, which matter the most to the Middle Eastern countries, would be included if I take it as a comprehensive view. If I try to link this region with that of Asian, would be much more comprehensive, and therefore Middle East becomes a much more comprehensive term for that matter. I hope.
The second question is, like you see that Russia was a traditional defense supplier in this region. Now China has made its foray into the region. So what do you think that would it lead to a different kind of a set of a conflict, especially when you see that Russia is also making overtures, and then there was this axis which was called the defense axis, Russia, India and China. So under this condition, what do you think? Are we going to see another like two partners? One was a traditional one supplying and the new one is entering. So there will be a conflict of interest. So what kind of a situation do you foresee?
Yes. So we should not forget that during the 1960s there was a sort of conflict between the USSR and China on ideological basis, and because the impact of which we find in India, CPI-CPIM, the way it came out. So therefore, Russia happened to be before the rise of China, the one to supply arms, ammunition, artillery to the Middle Eastern country, particularly say Iran facing Western domination, facing Western sanctions, or for that matter Egypt during that point of 1960s-70s Suez Canal crisis that happened. So what Russia did, Russia provided arms, ammunition to these countries. With respect to Syria, when Russia did provide in the recent crisis, did provide arms ammunition to fight against the Western domination in Syria. Though there is a sudden change in month of January, I think that there is a change in the regime in Syria too. But then, if it happens, then of course it is going to be competitive between both China and Russia. Forget about United States, but then they are going to compete. And who is better at a better term can provide them arms, ammunition, and this area also they would compete.
Okay. Now another thing that is kind of linked to me, to this, although it is not directly keeping Middle East in the perspective, but there has been a recent discussion on encirclement of India by US. It's like controlling Pakistan, it is trying to control Bangladesh, and the ZNZ is connected to, in Nepal is connected to US involvement. And in the south, you are seeing that encirclement by China, strong, that India is right now in between. So are we going to see, and today morning, like the media is announcing that Putin is coming as a new friend of India. So do you think that the focus from Middle East is going to be shifted to this region in the near future?
I mentioned that why Middle East is important for us, for US, for all the great power. But why India is going to be important for United States is of course for countering the rising power of China. And for that matter, United States knows that India will play a very important role in countering China because we have been part of I2U2 and Quad like institutions where we cooperate with United States. But then that does not mean that we are relegating or denouncing the importance of Russia and directly challenging the, and even we do not overtly say something that becomes hostile toward China. We are not saying it, rather we think before saying officially, before giving any statement, we think twice what exactly it is saying with respect to China, because ultimately, because we know about the intention of United States, it may leave any country behind. The same applies because of the Ukraine and Russia crisis. That earlier it was noted that it was speculation of the United States would help. Of course, it's helping, but then it is Ukraine soldiers that they are ultimately at the battlefield and fighting, right? So therefore, United States to be trusted to some extent, but not because it's not an ally of, close ally of United States. Russia can be trusted, but the United States cannot be, because the country that has been friendly to United States, many of the Middle East region too, has faced severe disruption, severe crisis in the area. So applies in case of Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, this Palestine issues, all these countries have been facing the Western challenges. So therefore, what India does, India takes a very neutral position with regard to Russia, China and United States. So the point where it required to engage, it engages, but then when it goes against other countries or becomes detrimental to the national interest, it keeps itself restrained. So therefore, India is taking a pragmatic approach, because it's not even going against the United States also. It's not making any statement in it. So it's to India. So therefore, it takes very pragmatic. So it tries to take, what I mean to say that all these three countries, all this, both Russia and China are important, and to some extent, China is also important for India, because India is dependent on China. China is not dependent on India.
Okay. Strategic balancing, as China is also practicing, like between Israel and Palestine, that's there in your thesis as well, as we have discussed, that it has been strategically balancing both the countries, although they have a rivalry, traditional rivalry, but it is kind of managing this. Now, do you think it is going to be a very, very kind of a sustain? Can it sustain such a thing? Because one thing is also important, that it is the leadership that matters, which is taking the decisions. So, do you think that if there is a change in leadership in China, this would continue, or there would be it is also something connected to how the leadership foresees or wants to look at or wants to take certain foreign policy decisions?
Right. What I understand that in order to play a role of a great power, what is required to some extent interfere and resolve the conflict, and that United States has been doing since past. Yes, of course, it has played and served in that is different thing, but it has played an active role. But China is taking a very skeptical nature. Skeptical, it doesn't directly interfere, and what is expected from a great power to interfere to solve the problem that actually exists with respect to even Israel-Palestine, or Saudi-Iran relations with the country that they have. So what is required to play a much more active role, but then it becomes contradictory to United States. So what is expected from a great power to interfere, but China is not playing what actually is expected. So therefore, again here, the questions of China's, completely being dependent on China, how would Middle Eastern country be dependent on China becomes questionable. That if it ignore United States, of course, Israel cannot ignore United States, because that is what becomes the backbone behind the rise of Israel in a particular region. So what is China required to do? Play a much more active role, and without harming the interest that it has with regard to Palestine and Israel, both, and also Iran, as I mentioned, why Iran is important, and Saudi Arabia. Right? Yeah. So in what way is going to resolve this problem?
In your thesis also, there is one snippet where you say that there is another Chinese, there was a Chinese in who had actually rescued Jews, and the Israelis, they feel very, very obliged to China. So yes, that's very interesting. And in fact, what I feel is from your study, you can actually think of just going beyond it and developing an alternative way of looking at things, which is different from the established categories as the schools in theories they suggest. And just saying that China is very pragmatic, or China has been, because this is a kind of strategy. Probably I use the word strategic balancing. I think that is also not proper word, appropriate word. You could think of something beyond. So from here I just come to your last two questions.
Right.
Now, since it is an ongoing work and you will be working more, so what according to you are, apart from the limitations that you gave, like if I allow you, or the sir allows you to write afresh, so what more things that would want to look into, and the variables that you would want to look into?
Taking the thesis further for further research. Of course, would be other than China. See, the problem with regard to the Middle Eastern region is that there is a vacuum. Vacuum means that sometime United States, China, has been the case of USSR, did have their presence, and there is an imbalance of power in the Middle Eastern region. That is what I find in my research, because Israel with one ideology has or is a nuclear powerful country, and Iran, in order to counter this power, is trying to become a nuclear powerful country. So if it happens, then there will be a balance, right? There will be a balance, and if, in the absence of which, what Iran is trying to use more of proxy war, because directly it cannot fight. So proxy war. So if there is a balance between Iran and Israel in this particular region, and therefore we do see that Israel is initiating a lot of airstrikes against Iran in order to destroy the nuclear establishment. Why this so? It's because it knows that once it becomes powerful, then no one is going to listen to what Israel says, or the domination of Israel will be cut through. So that balancing becomes, to me, becomes important for the regional stability in the region. This is one. Then also what I think is, other than these countries, there are small countries which are the study of which becomes very important to me, because and they can learn a lot from China too, that taking pragmatic approach, aligning with one another, taking economy further rather than ideological driven, and taking help from other countries for their development would be a very important instrument or the measure they can take for their own upliftment. Okay, so rather than looking only the big powers, what small powers can do can be taken as further research for this particular topic, and how can we enhance security, economic stability, and all these things.
You can look at the strategic distance that they maintain with both the powers.
Exactly.
Alternatively, juggling between the two and taking the interests.
Right.
Yes, addressing their own particular interests. Yes.
Other than you mentioned about the framework you were asking about that, I took this really liberal. But what also I find as framework of my study is neoclassical realism, because there are some domestic factors which are responsible why China is behaving that way it do. Right? So domestic factor, leadership cult also determines the foreign policy, aggressive nature, national unity, all those things, and because of which there is a rise of China. So in order, so this domestic factor as well as external factor, that there is a dominance of United States multilateralism, which are threatening the interests of China. As a result of which China is increasing its presence in this region. So therefore, this also becomes one important aspect of looking at the domestic factor, external factor, both of which play an important role why China is increasing its presence in the region. And other than that, we find a constructivist approach as well. China has constructed in the mind that this century of revolution, the one which I mentioned, that it has constructed that these are anti-Western, these are my enemies, or for that matter, anti-Western, and therefore look at with suspicion, with doubtful nature. So this is again China has constructed. Construction says that what you construct becomes a reality. So it has constructed, and this is based on which it is looking at. So constructivism also comes in my approach. Similarly, economic interdependence, which liberalism takes, is also coming in my picture. So all these frameworks have been included in my
You
thesis.
want to take it off?
Exactly, sir. I want to take it from African perspective, from Latin American perspective, from the smaller countries perspective, and imbalance that exists in the Middle Eastern region. It would be the guideline for further studies in the topic.
And what you would like to avoid? You have done the work. So what are the things that you would right now think that, okay, if I would have left it aside, it would have been more, like it would have been better?
See, now, there is something that I have, other than that what I have written, I have, there were something that were not much important to be studied. Would be, I have to think that what I should have avoided.
Yeah, because it's always a labor of love.
Exactly.
That
And also what more should have been included is the opinion from the local people of the Middle Eastern region and how the local newspaper writes about China.
Perception is very
Exactly.
important.
And for that field study on all those would play a very important role to grasp a comprehensive understanding.
Yes,
And the region.
perception is
Exactly.
very important. So, I'm done with it.
Final, statement with respect to Subham's thesis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Subham. That was wonderful. And since he's been able to answer many of my questions, I have many. In fact, I worked the big setup, but then he was able to satisfy most of the queries that I have and the others that probably we can talk outside. So I recommend that since he has been able to, I think all of us have been able to satisfy all of our queries. So I congratulate him and I recommend. So congratulations, Dr. Subham Kanu.
Thank you. This helps me a lot, both for me as the supervisor of Subham, but most importantly for Subham. At the end, let me propose a vote of thanks for Professor Chakroborty for accepting the invite from the MS University of Baroda to be the external examiner for the conduct of this YOC and taking the trouble of traveling all the way from the other end of India, from the eastern side of India to the western side. And definitely we value your association with the academic processes of the department and look forward to your continued support to us in our future activities and events. So my thanks are due to Professor Chakroborty. Thanks are also due once again to all other teachers, students, colleagues who attended this YOC, and a lot of other vivas are also scheduled in the coming weeks. So I hope that similar type of stimulating academic exchanges will take place during those sessions. Thank you very much. Formally, now the session is over. You can congratulate, you can have your snaps, you can have your mutual introductions, everything.